One other thing too is kind of talking sympathy versus empathy.
Yeah.
My understanding of sympathy is it's kind of understanding from your perspective, and empathy is more putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Do you think that being too empathetic in emergency medicine is kind of an unhealthy perspective?
That's funny. I think of it the other way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think of empathy as being more distant and understanding what they're going through, or trying to understand, and that this is bad, and you wouldn't want it heaped on you. I feel sympathy is more like being part of that, and I think being part of that issue, and so more like so this. Here's a case. A lot of people that know me know that my son had cancer and passed away. So, that was one of the hardest times in my life, right?
Absolutely.
Well, so when not too long after Nick died, Shauna Hamner, who is one of our dispatchers, she felt so bad because she realized that she was sending me on these like hospice calls every day after I came back to work, and she felt really bad, so she sympathized with me, but what I told her is it made me feel better to be able to go in there and talk to these people and kind of help them through that. In that case, that was sympathy because I felt what they felt because I had lived through that issue, whereas when Grandpa's had a heart attack and passed away in his sleep, and now I have to talk to Grandma. Now I'm empathetic because that's not close to what I've lived.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I think that probably empathy is better to have.
Some distance.
Some distance, and but in some cases, there's no getting around sympathy.
Yeah.
Because you live that, and I had a call when I was younger, when my son Nick was 18 months. He was very sick and he was in the hospital, and I was a brand new paramedic, and I had gone on a traffic accident in Pueblo, and the kid that was involved in the accident was 2, so pretty close to Nick's age, got cut in half in the accident, was still alive. Had he been dead, I probably would have been a lot better with it, but I had to work on him. I had to transport him, and he rested on the way to the hospital. I got to the hospital, and I'm this new paramedic, I'm a stud, so I'm doing CPR on this kid in the ER, and I get lightheaded, like I'm going to pass out. So I had to excuse myself, sit down, and I was like, this is BS. I can do this. So I went back over there, same thing happened, and I realized it really hit close to home, and so that was sympathetic, and I couldn't imagine what that family was going through,
right?
And just it almost ended my career, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, but my father-in-law Glenn, he told me those cases happen so rarely, and and rather he was trying to get me to keep going. He said, that patient had the best possible chance with you because of what and your skill and so on and so forth, which I appreciated. But
yeah, I think that's a really good story. I mean, sympathy will take its toll on you as a provider, for sure. But I think it can make you a better provider in a lot of those instances where you can actually relate to someone's situation. I have a similar one. My wife and I had a miscarriage a couple of years ago, and that's a conversation I have to have a lot in the ER is, hey, you're likely having a miscarriage, and a lot of times I will be sympathetic, and like, how would I want the provider to tell me that, and I think about the the way the provider approached it with us and said we were having a miscarriage and the attributes they expressed that I appreciated. And I try to sit down and actually take some time with the patient instead of just rushing in and out, and sit down and answer the questions they have about it, and, you know, sympathize with them, which certainly is harder on you emotionally to sit down and do that. But I think a lot of times patients do appreciate it if you're coming from that perspective. But yeah, certainly over time, and doing that too much, I think can really take its toll on you. And
absolutely,
you know, at the end of the day, you want to leave the job at the job so you can be there for your family, and that's not always possible. So I think that's important for people to kind of understand when they are being sympathetic versus when they're being empathetic, and kind of guard their minds a little bit. Like, hey, I was really sympathetic on that call. I've been through a similar situation, and you know, because I express so much sympathy, you kind of need to be aware of what that does to you mentally, and go home and form a healthy habit around that. You know, we all know people that don't have healthy habits surrounding EMS, and they sympathize a lot at work, and they go home and drink, or have all these other unhealthy habits. So I think just being aware of that when you're doing it is super important, or else it'll definitely tear you down.
Oh yeah, it eats you. It eats you from the inside out. And yeah, if you sympathize too much, you can't sympathize with every patient. And I've seen paramedics that have done that, and they're not with us anymore. Either they've left, found something else, thank God, or they, they've met their demise in some way, shape, matter, or form, drank themselves to get death, pills, whatever. And we've had some of that here in Colorado Springs, and it's it's awful, but it is what it is, I guess. Yeah,
I think that if you're somebody who can only sympathize and not distance yourself, it ends up being a detriment to you, and maybe this isn't the field for you if you're sympathizing every time. You know, at a certain point, with the vast majority of our patients, I think you need to see that they're a patient. They're not your family member, in order to stay healthy for yourself and to be there for the next patient.
True.
But that's a hard thing to do sometimes.
It really is. And being a field training instructor and a teacher, I try to tell the students and my interns, I try to tell them that they'll ask me, how long you've been doing this so long, how have you been doing it? And I always tell them off the cuff, well, it's not my emergency. And it's not my emergency, it's their emergency. I've got other emergencies that I would never expect, the plumber that I just picked up to help me with that emergency, you know what I mean? That's in my life, unless it was, obviously a plumbing emergency. But anyway, I just tell them, and sometimes they think that's harsh, but it's the facts and it's reality that if you want to do this job, do it well, do it for an extended period of time, you have to adopt that kind of mentality where you can distance yourself from the patient in a way that you can take care of the patient and do those things without, with the least amount of discomfort for them, and so on and so forth, but yet stay emotionally neutral as much as you can. And I think that's one of the things that they also, don't teach. Along that same line too, I remember sitting, we're doing more resilience type of training now, after the fact, in continuing ed and stuff. And I think I sit next to Matt Berglund one day in a paramedic refresher class, and it was one of the first classes that I can remember where we had somebody come in that talked about resiliency and how to, maintain at this job. And Matt and I just kind of sat there and we were like, well, I don't have that issue. I don't have that issue. We were talking about PTSD and so on and so forth, and we were like, I don't have that. And so I took the opportunity afterwards to talk to she was a psychologist, I said, I've got a different issue. And Matt was standing there as well, and he agreed. I said, I feel bad that I don't feel bad. And she said, oh, we get that too. So it's just so multifaceted, the issue. And I think we compartmentalize. Tracy and I were talking about this today, earlier, that we tend to compartmentalize stuff. And I told her, I said, I think we do both put good, bad, everything in compartments, different compartments, good or bad. And it's kind of like a random access memory. We can kind of pull from them if we need them, or we can lock them away and keep them locked away. But I think that, we tend to segment things off and put them away. And
I totally see that. I think, because you name any number of just horrible things that we've seen, especially doing this 46 years, you've seen everything. You name it, you've seen it. And I think back to the horrible tragedies that I've witnessed and the things that I've seen. And I'm kind of the same way. I don't really feel like I have, PTSD because of it. But it's kind of odd that I don't feel worse about it. But I think that ability to compartmentalize, a lot of times people say that's a bad thing, but that's a necessity in EMS. You can't be thinking about your last patient when you're running on your next one and still be a good provider. And none of us are perfect at that. And I think that's an important thing. Going back to the sympathy versus empathy thing, I think it's really good perspective from you that you have had calls where you're sympathetic, and you also realize that you can't do that all the time. And you're not just empathetic. You're not standoffish. You're not viewing this just as a patient every time. You've had times where you've been sympathetic, and you've had times when you're empathetic. And I think just the awareness of that is super powerful for people to realize what they're doing in the situation, and not to be one or the other all the time. I think just knowing that about yourself is very powerful for people, and explains why you can do this for so long. Just that awareness. Because clearly you're very aware when you're in different modes, and I feel like I am as well. And I think that means you can do this for a while and still be healthy, and as long as you're not, taking it out in the wrong ways, or opening those compartments when you shouldn't, or open up a bottle of alcohol when you get home and opening that compartment. I think that's powerful.
I think you do need to open those compartments once in a while, sometimes, just to, for several reasons, keep yourself humble, because I think we get a God-like mentality. I'm doing this. And I think that sometimes we need to be humbled, and sometimes you need to open a box and go, man, I really screwed that call up. And maybe I shouldn't do that again. That kind of thing. But I think you do have to segment those things off and just keep them for whenever you need them.
Right. I think that's an important point. What you said is, we don't perform well on every call. We don't, whether it's a skill that you didn't complete, or a differential that you weren't really considering when that was the problem the whole time. We run these calls that don't go perfect. You're like, I couldn't get that intubation, or whatever it is. And when it's something like that, I think we can be really hard on ourselves, and that goes into a compartment. that call that I wish I had done better on, and that can eat at you too. That's another huge point that I wasn't thinking about. But how do you get past that stuff?
Well, I see that stuff all the time because I've got students, and I've got the blessing and the luxury of longevity, and believe me, I've made every mistake. I've given the wrong meds. I've given the wrong dosages. I haven't been able to get a tube when I should have been able to get that tube. I completely missed the assessment, and go, have an brand new EMT go, well, what do you think about this? Maybe it's that, and go, okay, you're right. Thanks for helping me out, but you do have that, and I have seen so many times when, for instance, like when people are just learning how to do IVs, it's such an important aspect of our job, right? There's so much pressure about doing it. Well, You don't get them all. You just don't. And I've seen people beat themselves up over, and they get in slumps. They'll try 10 IVs and not get any of them. And somebody will walk in and take the IV catheter, throw it behind their back, and get it. And it's like, so they get hard on themselves about that. But so I'll always ask them, okay, well, let's analyze this. Did you put the tourniquet on right? Yeah. Did you disinfect the area correctly? Yeah. Did you pick the proper vein? Yeah. How about the size of needle? Yeah. Okay. Did you use the correct angle of attack with that angiocath? Yeah. Did you get into the vein? Yeah. What happened? Well, the vein blew. Well, there's no accounting for the cooperation of the patient's vein. I said, you've done all your job right. Now it's up to the patient's vein to do its job right. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. And you've got 10 people in a row that you've not been able to do that on. And they've not cooperated.
Right.
Now, and I'll watch them, and I'll say, hey, maybe you should try this or do this, But if they're doing it right, I have no suggestion for them, but just get on the horse and do it again.
Yeah. Stop thinking about all the ones you missed.
Yeah. The next one's the next one. Yeah. So, so you see that, and that leads to all sorts of issues.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that example of something as simple as an IV that you have to do a ton, and not beating yourself up over that, because I think that is something you see newer people do, is like, I couldn't get that IV, whereas people that have been doing this a while, it's like, well, I didn't get an IV. You get some, you don't get some. You can only control so many of those variables. But I think moving on from that and not beating yourself up, I think we can kind of extrapolate that to the higher level skills, the intubations, the medications that we have that are, super dangerous if given at the wrong time. You can only, control so many things. And if you have to at least learn from that, that last call. You can't keep dwelling on it. You can't keep beating yourself up, or it's going to impact your next patient. So you got to learn from it. You got to move on. And that's really hard to do, when we're dealing with life and death and our decisions have consequences. That's a really hard skill to have, to not beat yourself up over a call and move on. But I think that's foundational to doing this job for any length of time, is you have to move on from that last call.
For sure. And it happens so quickly. And I can't count the number of times I've gone shh and went, oh wait, I need to pull that back and can't do it now. So it's but you learn from it and it makes you better. So, and you have to learn from it. If you don't learn from it, then that's where the issue is. Everybody makes mistakes.
Right.
If you learn from them, then mistakes are great. It's how we learn. It's practice, right? It's not, it's medical practice. It's not medical. They say it's art, but it is an art, but it's a practiced art.
It's not an exact science.
No, it's not.
It's very much the practicing of medicine, and they call it that for a reason. And if you don't learn from your mistakes, you got to assign meaning. I heard somebody talk about, all your past experiences. You have to assign meaning to that, or else it's nothing, and you're going to stay in that horrible moment in your past until you've assigned meaning to it. And assigning meaning is learning from your mistakes and being able to move forward, or else you're stuck there.
Well, it does, and it makes you timid and shy, and when your patient needs you to be bold and specific, and and that's what our patients need us to be. They need us to be able to make split-second decisions. And in the field, we don't have the luxury of pulling labs other than the sugar. We can't tell what the lactate is. We can't. We can guess. We can't tell what what their pH is. We can guess. Because of the other presentations, but and we have to determine those particular things. And if you dwell on your mistakes, then you tend to pull back and not do the things that you were trained to do, and that how to do, and that you've done in the past and it's worked. Because if you let those things keep you back, it's not good for you in the career, and it's not good for the patient, obviously.
That's really good.